The dust hung thick in the air like a curtain of gold, turning the Texas sky into a glowing haze. Jackson Wade stood on the wooden platform of Clearwater's railway station, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. He was 32, a man carved by the plains, broad-shouldered, quiet, and weathered by a lifetime of cattle drives. Years of sleeping under stars and waking to coyote cries had left his skin a stow as rawhide. But today the steady cowboy felt nervous for the first time in a long while. He wasn't waiting for a cattle shipment or a ranch hand. He was waiting for a wife. The 3:15 train whistle echoed down the valley, and Jackson's stomach turned. He had written to his cousin Martha back east, asking her to find him a woman, someone gentle, soft-spoken, and ready to settle into a quiet life. A woman who'd bring peace to a home built on hard work and silence. Martha had found Eleanor Prescott. T3, educated, polite, known for her modesty. Perfect, everyone had said. As the iron horse roared into view, black smoke curling above the cars, Jackson straightened his back and adjusted his collar. The town stretched behind him, small and sun-bleached. One saloon, one church, a few shops. Civilization was just beginning to creep across the Texas plains, and he wanted to build his piece of it. When the train screeched to a halt, passengers stepped down in a rush off steam and dust. Businessmen, families, saloon girls. But Jackson's eyes found her immediately. She stepped from the train with the grace of a woman who belonged on ballroom floors, not row wooden platforms. Her deep blue traveling dress was buttoned neatly to her throat, her hair pinned under a modest bonnet. She was exactly what he'd imagined until she looked up. Her eyes were green, bright as spring grass, and in them burned to something wild, a spark that didn't belong to quiet women. Jackson froze as she scanned the crowd. When her gaze landed on him, she didn't look away. Instead, her lips curved into the faintest knowing smile. "Mr. Wade," her voice was calm but strong, cutting through the noise around them. "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly, tipping his hat. "Miss Prescott." "Eleanor," she corrected, extending a gloved hand. Her grip was firm. "I trust you received my letter about the arrangements." "Yes, ma'am." "Reverend Morrison's waiting at the church." She nodded, her eyes sweeping over the dusty street, the wooden storefronts, the cowboys lounging near the saloon. "It's smaller than I imagined," she murmured. "It's growing," Jackson replied a little too defensively. "Got a new school last year. Doctor just built an office with a surgery." Her lips twitched. How progressive. Whether it was sarcasm or not, he couldn't tell. They loaded her trunk and carpet bag into his wagon. For a woman from back east, her belongings were surprisingly few. Eleanor watched everything. The townsfolk, the distant prairie with sharp eyes that seemed to see more than she let on. The ride to the church was quiet. She sat straight beside him, hands folded. Her perfume a mix of lavender and something earthy beneath. The wedding was small and quick. Reverend Morrison read the vows in his trembling voice, while Mrs. Morrison and the clerk stood witness. Eleanor spoke clearly, her eyes never leaving Jackson's face. When the moment came to seal the vows, she lifted her chin, calm and composed as though she were granting him permission. Her kiss was soft but confident, and Jackson's pulse stumbled. After signing the register, Mrs. Morrison handed Eleanor a bundle of biscuits. "For the journey to your new home, dear," she said kindly, though Harry's looked sorry, like she was sending a lamb into the wilderness. They rode north as the sun sank low, painting the plains in gold and crimson. Eleanor sat quietly, but Jackson could sense her unease, could feel it in the air between them. "It's not much," he said as his ranch came into view. "A sturdy log house with a barn and a corral. But it's home, built it myself." "It's perfect," she said, surprising him with a genuine smile. "You built all this," quote. "With some help," he admitted, pulling up by the porch. When he helped her down, her body brushed his, and that lavender scent mixed with sweat and wood smoke made his heart beat faster. For a moment she held his gaze, and there was something in her eyes. Strength, maybe even challenge. Then she stepped away. Inside, the cabin was simple. One main room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table, and a small bedroom beyond. Jackson had cleaned, but he saw now how Barrett looked through her refined eyes. "I'll start supper," she said briskly, removing her gloves. You know how to cook?" "Of course," she replied, already inspecting his supplies. Her movements were precise, efficient, less like a pampered lady, more like someone who'd worked before. Jackson watched, half confused, half impressed, as she moved about the small kitchen with confidence. By the time he returned from tending the horses, the smell of bacon and beans filled the cabin. They ate quietly, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. When the dishes were done, they stood facing each other in the soft lamplight, the open bedroom door behind her. "I know this is sudden," Jackson began awkwardly. "If you'd rather take some time to settle." Eleanor stepped closer. "Mr. Wade," she said softly, "you've made some assumptions about the kind of woman you married." He blinked. I thought. You thought a quiet woman would answer an advertisement to marry a stranger and cross 1,000 miles into the frontier." Her eyes gleamed. "You wanted peace, Cowboy, but I'm afraid you just invited a storm." She reached up, unpinned her hair, and dark waves tumbled down over her shoulders. Jackson forgot how to breathe. "Cowboy wanted a quiet wife," she whispered, her voice low and teasing. "Got a wild one instead." And for the first time in his life, Jackson Wade realized he wasn't the one leading anymore. The wild frontier outside had found its match within his own walls. The morning sun poured through the cabin window, painting the wooden floor in warm gold. Jackson Wade was already awake, though he hadn't slept much. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, muscles sore in ways that made his chest tighten with memory. Beside him, Eleanor slept deeply, her dark hair spilling across the pillow like ink, one arm flung carelessly over her head, even asleep. She looked untamed, a woman who claimed space instead of shrinking from it. Jackson rose quietly, pulling on his clothes and boots. He meant to tend the cattle before she woke to get some distance to think. But when he reached for his hat, he heard her voice, soft and amused. "Running off already, Cowboy?" He turned, startled. She was awake, eyes half-lidded with sleep. Bother's smirk was pure mischief. "Cattle don't wait for dreams, ma'am," he muttered, fumbling for his vest. "Then I'd better get dressed too," she said, stretching like a cat before slipping from the bed. "Not necessary," he said quickly. "You should rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead," she replied lightly, already pulling on a riding skirt from her trunk. When she stepped outside a short while later, Jackson froze. Gone was the prim Eastern lady in her traveling gown. In her place stood a woman dressed for work. Boots, blouse, split riding skirt, and a braid down her back. "Where'd you get that outfit?" hesked. "Packed it," she said simply. "Did you think I came all this way just to embroider curtains?" Before he could reply, she was already heading toward the corral. "Which horse is mine?" Sheathed eyes scanning the small herd. "Yours?" He blinked. "These ain't riding school ponies, Eleanor. They're half-wild cow ponies," made a firm hand. He's flicked to a bay mare grazing near the fence. "That one," she said. She looked smart. "That's Rosalind," he said slowly, spirited. "Throws most folks." "We'll get along just fine," Eleanor said, already climbing through the rails. "Ma'am." Jackson started forward, but she was already moving among the horses, calm and confident. She spoke softly to the mare, hand-out movements sure. Within moments, she had Rosalind's bridle in place, her tone firm but gentle. "Saddle," she said over her shoulder. Jackson fetched one, half expecting her to give up. Instead, she saddled the horse cleanly, checking every strap like someone who knew her work. When she swung into the saddle, Rosalind pranced, testing her rider. Eleanor only smiled, settling deep in the seat. "Well," she called, "you coming, or shall I check your herd myself?" Quote, he couldn't help it. He laughed, the sound bursting from him like a bark of disbelief and admiration. He mounted his own horse and followed. They rode out together into the wide-open prairie. The sun climbed higher, the grass whispering in the wind, and for the first time Jackson saw her smile freely. It wasn't the polite smile of a proper lady. It was alive, real, unguarded. "You ride well," he admitted. "My uncle raised horses in Kentucky," she said. "Spent my summers training colts when Noon was looking." "Your family let you do that?" "They didn't know," she said, grinning. "If they had, they'd have locked the barn. They spent the morning checking cattle." Eleanor, sharp-eyed and quick to learn. When they found a cow limping, Jackson explained about a wound that needed treating. Before he could rope her, Eleanor snatched the coil from his saddle. "Let me," she said. "No, hold on. Too late." The rope sailed out. It wasn't perfect. It caught the horns instead of the neck, but it held. Jackson stared. "Where in the devil did you learn that?" "Practice," she said, eyes glinting. By noon she was covered in dust, her cheeks flushed, her smile bright. Jackson watched her with something between pride and awe. This wasn't the woman he'd expected. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't quiet. She was alive in a way that stirred something deep inside him, but the town didn't see her that way. A few days later, while riding back from the pasture, they passed the neighboring Hrick's ranch. Mary Hriss was hanging laundry, her children playing in the dust. Her eyes went wide at the sight of Eleanor riding astride like a man. Her braid flying, her skirt split. "Morning, Mary," Jackson called. "Jackson," Mary replied stiffly, eyes flicking to Eleanor. "Mrs. Wade." "Please, call me Eleanor," she said warmly. "What beautiful children you have." "Thank you," Mary said coldly. "I'm sure you'll be blessed with your own soon enough. Then you'll have appropriate things to occupy your time." Eleanor's back straightened, but her tone stayed pleasant. "How fortunate we all get to decide what's appropriate for ourselves." They rode on, leaving Mary gaping behind. "People will talk," Jackson warned. "Let them," Eleanor said fiercely. "I didn't come here to live in a cage, even if it's a pretty one." And she didn't. Every day she proved herself tougher than the land itself. She worked beside him, mended fences, fed cattle, baked bread, and still somehow kept her grace. By night they argued, laughed, and loved with a fire that burned brighter than the hearth. But storms don't always come from the sky. By late June the drought arrived. The land cracked open, the creek dried to dust, and hope thinned like smoke. Jackson stood on the porch, watching the shimmering horizon. "How long since a rain?" Eleanor asked, handing him a tin cup of coffee. "2 weeks," he said. "Maybe 7. She studied him, saw the worry he tried to hide. "We'll manage." But managing turned into surviving. Every day they hauled barrels from the river 5 mi away. Eleanor refused to stay home, working beside him under the burning sun, sweat soaking her clothes. The other wives whispered in town, called her unnatural, unladylike, but she didn't care. When Reverend Morrison's wife said loudly one morning that, quote, "A woman like that will bring ruin on her husband," Jackson surprised himself. "Fortunate," then he said, "that I married a woman who doesn't scare easy." Eleanor smiled at him, and even in that brutal heat, it felt like a cool breeze across his heart. By August, the drought broke everything but them. The cattle thinned, the land turned to powder. One evening, Jackson found Eleanor sitting by the empty creek bed, tears streaking her dust-covered face. "It's too hard," she whispered. "That calf this morning," she looked at him like she knew. He sat beside her quietly. "You could go back east," he said gently. "No one would blame you." She turned on him, eyes blazing through the tears. "Is that what you want?" "No," he said. "That's not what I want." Quote, "Then don't insult me by thinking I'm too weak for this life." She snapped then softer. "I chose this." "I chose you," he smiled faintly. "You sure did." That night they made plans, real plans, Tossel part of the herd, to dig deeper wells, to do whatever it took. When a wealthy rancher named Garrett wrote in offering to buy them out for cheap, Eleanor stood her ground. "We'll die on this land before we sell to a man like you," she told him. Garrett's smile turned cruel. "We'll see." That night the wind began to howl, tearing across the prairie, carrying dust and despair. Jackson stood at the window, watching Eleanor move about the house, her jaw set, her eyes bright with defiance even as the world outside tried to bury them. And he realized something with a sudden, deep certainty. He hadn't just married a wife. He'd married the storm. The dust storm lasted 3 days. It swallowed the horizon, turning day to dusk and breath to grit. Jackson and Eleanor sealed the windows with wet rags, huddling inside as the wind screamed, like 1,000 ghosts outside their little home. The cattle bawled miserably in the barn, and every board of the house groaned under the storm's fury. When it finally broke, the world outside lay buried beneath a new layer of ash-cold dust, and 2 more cows were dead. Jackson stood over the bodies at dawn, hollow-eyed. "Maybe Garrett's right," he muttered. "Maybe it's time to sell." Eleanor stood beside him, her face stir with soot, her braid undone, but her spirit unbroken. "We're not giving up," she said fiercely. "Not now, not ever. Eleanor, be reasonable. We can't fight the weather. Then we fight how we respond to it." She shot back, gripping his arm. "You built this place with your hands. We'll hold it with our hearts." Her fire rekindled his own. Together they dug trenches, hauled water, and patched fences. And then one night thunder rumbled over the dry plains. Eleanor stepped onto the porch, her face tilted to the wind. "The air smelled of rain." "Is that?" Jackson began. A single drop hit her cheek. Then another, and then the heavens opened. Rain came down in sheets, washing away the dust, soaking their clothes until they laughed and cried all at once. She threw her arms around him, rain and tears mixing on her face. "See," she gasped. "We just had to outlast it." The drought wasn't over, but something inside them had changed. They'd proven they could survive the worst together, Months later, autumn came with golden grass and cooler winds. One morning, Eleanor walked into the barn where Jackson was mending a bridle. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was calm. "Jack," she said, "we need toe talk." He straightened instantly. "What's wrong?" "I'm going to have a child." For a long moment, he just stared. Then he sat heavily on a hay bale, his throat tight. "A baby," he whispered. "Ours." "Ours," she said, smiling through tears. He laughed, half choked, half in awe. Then worry crept in. "You can't keep working the way you do, Ellie. It's not safe." Her eyes flashed. "I'm not made of glass. I'll be careful, but I won't stop living." Jackson sighed. "You've got a wild streak that could break 10 horses. She grinned. "Then it's a good thing you're a cowboy." As winter came, the news spread through Clearwater. Some townsfolk whispered that motherhood might finally settle Eleanor Wade. Others said she'd learned her lesson from the drought. They didn't know her at all. Eleanor worked as long as she could, mending tack, helping with light chores, always refusing to beetle. Jackson worried every moment, but he admired her more with each passing day. Then one February night, the blizzard struck. Jackson woke to the house shaking, wind howling like a living thing. Beside him, Eleanor tensed, gripping his hand. "Just the wind," he said, but she shook her head. "Jackson," she gasped. "It's time." The words hit him harder than any storm. "No, it's early." Pain tightened her features. "Tell that to the baby." He looked out the window. The world was white, roaring, impassable. No horse could survive that ride to town. "I can't get the doctor," he said helplessly. Her eyes met his steady despite the pain. "Then you'll do it." Quote, he had delivered calves and faws before, but this was Eleanor. His Eleanor. His hands trembled as he boiled water, tore sheets, did everything he could remember from a lifetime of ranch work and instinct. Hours passed. The storm screamed outside while Eleanor fought her own inside. She was fierce, unyielding, even as exhaustion dragged her down. "I can't," she whispered once, eyes glassy. "Yes, you can," he said, wiping her brow. "You've survived worse, Ellie. You survived me." She gave a breathless laugh before another contraction tore through her. When I tended, she looked at him, her voice faint. "If something happens, you save the baby." "Don't talk like that," he said fiercely, holding her hand tight. "You both come through this. You hear me?" The next moments blurred. A cry, small, weak, then none at all. The baby was blue, limp in his hands. "No," Eleanor moaned. "No," Jackson's world collapsed. He rubbed Thetney back, desperate. "Come on, little one, breathe. You're mother's child. You don't give up." A sputter, a gasp, then acre that filled the cabin. "She's alive," Jackson choked out, tears cutting through the grime on his face. "Ellie, she's alive." Eleanor laughed and sobbed all at once, clutching their daughter to her chest. "She's perfect," she whispered. But Jackson saw the blood, the pallidness in Eleanor's face. Her hand trembled as she reached for him. "Cold," she murmured. He held her, terrified. "Stay with me, Ellie. Don't you dare leave me." "Her name," she whispered weakly. "Hope. Her name is Hope." He nodded through tears. "Hope," he said. "Our hope." By dawn, the storm had passed. Jackson wrapped his wife and child in blankets and fought through the snow to town. Doc Henley met them at the door, barking orders, his steady hand saving them both. 3 days later, Eleanor woke fully, color back in her cheeks, Hope sleeping beside her. Jackson sat by the bed, eyes raw from sleepless nights. "She's beautiful," Eleanor whispered. "She's strong," Jackson said, "just like her mother." Quote, the women of Clearwater whispered about the birth, some saying it was a miracle, others saying it was God's punishment for Eleanor's wild ways. But for the Wes, it was proof of something greater, love born from fire and storm. Months passed, the ranch healed. So did Eleanor. She became a mother in her own fierce way, protective, bold, and endlessly loving. When outlaws later threatened the ranch, it was Eleanor who took the rifle first, defending her home and child without hesitation. By Hope's first birthday, even the town's harshest critics had changed their tune. The wild Mrs. Wade had become a legend, admired, respected, and a little feared. Years rolled on. Hope grew strong and curious, always chasing the horizon like her mother. Eleanor taught her to ride, to rope, and to speak her mind. Jackson watched them both with pride so deep it hurt. One evening, as the sun set over their thriving ranch, Eleanor stood on the porch with Jackson and their little girl. Hope pointed to a hawk gliding across the sky. "Mama, look, he's free." Eleanor smiled. "Just like you, sweetheart. Just like all of us." Jackson slipped an arm around her waist. You remember the ad you answered? He said, grinning. Her green eyes sparkled. Theon asking for a quiet wife. Yeah, he said, laughing softly. I didn't get what I wanted. No, Elalana whispered, resting her head against him. You got something better. As the stars rose over the prairie and the wind carried the scent of sage and rain, Jackson realized she was right. He hadn't just found a wife. He'd found his match, his storm, his heart. The cowboy who wanted a quiet life had built one filled with love, laughter, and the wildest spirit the West had ever known. And when the moonlight touched their little home, it glowed like a promise that every dawn from now on would belong to